Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Film Roundtable. I was preparing for this earlier and thought I was going to be talking about the anxiety of the wait we've had in the US this week, but we can celebrate now because Biden has been announced the winner. Woo! We're all very relieved here. My neighborhood in Bed-Stuy is going nuts, but I hope everyone is well and feeling good and feeling a little bit more grounded into moving forward and all the work that needs to be done. But we're super happy to have everybody here today. And you are going to have a really great, uplifting conversation about collaboration and artistry and partnership. I'm really looking forward to talking to our four panelists. But before we start and before I get into the introductions, we have a ritual here at Film Roundtable where we like to do a moment of silence. So we take this moment to honor all of the 1,252,751 worldwide COVID deaths as of today. It's a lot. And I know the past few weeks, we've been really focused, at least in the States, on the election. But COVID numbers are still escalating here and around the world. And we'd also like to honor all of our Black and Brown brothers and sisters, as well as our First Nation brothers and sisters whose lives have been taken by the hands of police brutality and other senseless acts of violence. So let's just take a moment here and honor. Okay, thank you so much. So without further ado, I want to introduce our four panelists for today. We'll start with Mona Fastvold. She's a director, a writer, a mom, a partner to Brady. She was a winner at the Venice Film Festival this year for her latest film, beautiful film called The World to Come. And then we have Brady Corbet, director, writer, producer, dad, used to be an actor, and a partner to Mona. Vox Lux was his latest film, which came out in 2018. And he's currently in pre-production with his new film called The Brutalist, which starts hopefully shooting in February if all goes well. We have Antonio Campos, who is a director, writer, producer, dad, partner to Sofia. His latest film premiered on Netflix in September. It is called The Devil All the Time. And then last but not least, I would like to introduce Sofia Subercaseaux. Is that correct? Did I pronounce it correct? Okay. She is an editor. She is a mom and a mom to be and partner to Antonio. And she edited The Devil All the Time, as well as Antonio's film prior to that one called Christine. So let's take a moment of virtual applause and welcome all of our panelists to Film Roundtable. Yay! So I'm, being a mom and a wife and in the film business, not so much anymore, but I was, and having a partner who's in the business as well, I'm always interested on how different people make it all work together, and that it's, a lot to take on, working in the business, the same business as your partner, maintaining kids, having a house, all that stuff. It can be really a lot to do with one person. And, everybody has their own way. And I'm always really interested to talk about that because I'm a Generation Xer, and I feel like prior to my generation, there weren't a ton of working moms in the business. There were a lot of success. Obviously, there weren't a ton of women working in the business or really successful women, but a lot of them were, didn't have kids. They chose one path or another. And I'm just, I'm really wanting to get into that and how and I'm sure our audience would love to hear how you make it work for yourselves. So I would love to start with Mona, because I remember I've known Brady and Mona for a long time. I've known Brady for a really long time. I produced his first film that he directed called Protect You and Me. And I, remember talking to them about how they were going to maybe set up a format where they would take turns. One of them would do their film, they write together, they produce together, they really collaborate. But then one was going to be more present with Ada, with their daughter. So Mona, maybe you could get into a little bit about how was that something that was really thought out and talked about when you guys got together as a couple, or did it kind of freestyle with what was going to work?
Yeah, we started out saying, okay, so you'll direct a film and I'll direct a film, we'll take turns and it will work out great. Of course, that's not how it works at all. Like it's you can't decide when you make a movie, actor schedules keep changing, financing suddenly comes together. It's so, you have so little say over when you make a movie as a director. It's just really like when it comes together, be ready to go. So we've lived a very nomadic and life without that, we just kind of had to go with the flow. And luckily our daughter is only 6 years old, so she's just come with us whenever we've made a movie. And somehow magically on these last couple of films, we haven't been shooting at the same time or been in pre-production at the same time, which has been really fortunate. But it's not really, you can't plan like that. I guess we're just lucky to have a flexible child who's down with spending a lot of time on set. I think for me, it also has been important to sort of show that it's okay to have a child on set and to be a mother and to be a director. And I encouraged a lot of my crew members and the actors to also bring their children onto the last film. So we had a really eclectic set of a breastfeeding trailer and for my first AD and my other crew members who were young mothers and had their first child and were still working on the film, and as well as my lead actress who had a small baby as well. So we were kind of, I at least think I was trying to, and I brought Ada as well, and so just kind of create that environment where that's okay, which was really not something people were used to seeing in Romania, especially. So, but I don't know. It's yeah, you can never plan ahead in this business. So.
Yeah, but I feel like you had a structure of a plan ahead of time, and you've tried to keep within that a little bit, even though being flexible. Yeah. And I remember in Childhood of a Leader that you're in a scene with Ada when she was a baby, breastfeeding her, right? As an extra.
Well, I think that's what made me think of, because I had a lot of, had several crew members who had just had a baby on and brought their babies with them on this film. And I remember that with Ada on Childhood, that I was always breastfeeding and pumping by the monitor in Hungary. And how that was also people, crew members came up to me saying like, oh, this is so cool to see this, because breastfeeding in public is considered inappropriate in both Romania and Hungary. So that was something they were not used to seeing at all. And also a lot of the younger crew members were saying, oh, I just didn't imagine that I could be a parent and have this job. And that if you're in a position of power on a film set, being a mother is kind of discredits that, versus I see it the opposite way. I'm like, I'm the master of multitasking because I'm a mother.
That's beautiful. What about you, Sofia? What do you two do when Antonio's going on a film to direct or produce with your child, or you're editing? Like, do you come on set or?
Yeah, I have. For us, it's different because we don't, I think for you guys, for Brady and Mona, it's even harder because you have to really take, like our jobs are not exclusive to one another. Like we work together, like full time, which has other challenges, but we don't have to take turns. It's like when we're working together. So when Antonio's working, I'm usually working with him. But yes, the only movie that Emilio is only 2 years old. So he was born 3 months before we had to like move to Alabama to shoot The Devil. And of course, the movie came together the minute we had our first baby, and we were like settled in Chile to like spend time with my family. We just built a house here. We were ready to like spend the summer here. And it was like, no, you're moving to Alabama with a newborn, and you shouldn't go. So it was intense, but it was also really fun, and we got really lucky and had someone that came with us that helped us from Chile that made it possible. If not, it would have been impossible. And I came to set, but I was editing as we were shooting
and breastfeeding.
Yeah, so we had this system where like we made it so our house was right next to the office where I was editing, so I could like run back and forth to breastfeed or just bring Emilio with me. And then we would go to set 2, and Emilio's also has a few scenes in the movie. He's young Tom Holland. Young Tom Holland. And yeah, it was a crazy marathon, but I think it would have been impossible to do it any other way.
Did you sleep at all?
No, we really didn't. And Antonio was shooting crazy hours, like full nights, and Emilio was not sleeping at all. And it was just madness. And I remember like it was like 5 a.m, and Antonio was like waking up to go to set, and I was like, oh, just like so confused. And then like when he came home at like 11 p.m, we were just so like burnt that we would still like go out and have a drink around the corner. We're like just like fuck it, like we're not sleeping, like let's just like have fun. Yeah, and we'll just like go to this cute like bar around the corner and meet the crew and just have a drink and try to pretend like we were sleeping, but we really weren't at all.
No. I think that was like you never slept for like the entire shoot of childhood when Ada was the same age as Emilia.
Yeah.
You just never slept.
No, we did, yeah, we really at all.
Yes, and then I got very, very ill. I developed some sort of medieval rash that didn't allow me to walk on set. So it didn't work out so well for me. I mean, I was working on second unit on The Devil all the time, so I got to see Antonio and Sofia in action, and you guys were doing really well. I mean, much better than we were doing on childhood. I don't know. I don't know if I maybe more neurotic than Sofia, but not Antonio.
Yeah, I remember like the night, like there was like 2 weeks of night shoots that it was just like, what's going on?
The last 2 weeks were
such a
6-day weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also had like it really made a difference having like this Chilean babysitter came with us.
Yeah.
And if she wouldn't have come, it would have been impossible. And she was such like, I think it's also important to admit that you need help and seek it and appreciate it and it really would have been impossible. I mean, if she wasn't there, either the movie or Emilia would have been heavily neglected. Like it wouldn't have been possible to do both things the way we did it if she wasn't helping us.
Well, I think that's what we did not do that on childhood, and that's sort of what we ended up getting a lot of help on during shooting on The World to Come. Then we had family coming home, and our daughter was either with Brady's mom or with our parents, luckily, because it was during summer break. Because I think that's the thing. Like, if you think that you can be this like incredible sort of super present parent during shooting as well as directing a movie, that's not going to happen. It's not. That's not possible. But shooting is not all the time. So you have long periods of writing, or when you're probably not in the most intense part of the edit process, where you can be so present. You can
completely.
other people don't have breaks. So then you know.
And we were still like, I mean, Antonio, of course, less because he was on set, but I was still spending most of the day with Emilio, but with someone with an extra set of arms that could like I could it just made it possible so we wouldn't like lose our minds and like, for example, go get a drink at the end of the day and just like be able to like take a breath and look at each other without having like a crying baby in between and talk about the movie for a minute. But yeah, I think it's important to embrace all the help you can get.
Yeah, I think that's something that it took me a long time to learn as a mom and as a producer. And I just wanted to be like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then fast forward to like my late 40s. And I'm like, you know what? I can't do that like anymore. And I don't want to produce because I basically burned myself out. And, you know, I didn't practice any self-care. And I think that's a really important thing, especially in this business, because we run ourselves so ragged and, you know, and not to just single out women, but I think I always felt like I had something to prove to all the men I was working to, that I was, you know, not going, you know, I wasn't too tired, or I could bring my kids and they'd be fine and I'd find a babysitter for whatever it may be.
You were producing a short film, delivering you know, I mean, Zephyr was quite premature. And I remember you were texting me, and it was a fucking short film. And I was like, what are you doing?
I was insane. I think, you know, I think it was a way to check out of my body and not deal with what was going on inside. You know what I mean?
Sure,
so it was much more of like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to that over there because being here right now makes me really uncomfortable and like scared. And is my son going to be okay? You know, so I think those coping mechanisms, which a lot of people have, right? You know, we don't necessarily always want to like be in our bodies and feel how we're feeling, because it can be super painful. But I also wanted to talk, because I think between Brady and Antonio, the two of you have been involved in collaboration, not just together, but yes, together for a very long time. I mean, Antonio, I think was, you know, your group from NYU started Borderline, right? And that was in a very unusual, you were kind of the first of your kind, at least in the new generation of filmmaking, and that we're trying to collaborate together, because you had the smart idea of like, we're going to get a lot more done and learn a lot more if we're doing it together and switching roles. So what, like, when you guys were in film school, how did that work for you? Like, where did you get inspired to do that? I know you're obviously making student films, so you need to rotate a little bit, and someone shoots the camera, someone produces, you know, but a lot of times egos get in the way, right, of that sort of track. So how did that work with you guys? Were you all just super yin and like, oh my God, like you're great, you know, or like, how did that work?
We were not super yin. It is a really good, that was when I went to NYU, I had only dreamt of going to NYU. I was like, I didn't apply to any other school. I lived in the village. I grew up in the village, and I had dreamed about going to NYU. And I got in, and I had imagined it was going to be this kind of like this amazing creative space where everybody just supported everybody else, and that, like, you know, we just sat together and showed each other our favorite movies and then made mistakes together and learned from each other. And it was not that. And everybody was like, I'm a director and I'm an island, and I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be Spielberg, I'm going to be Scorsese. And it felt I was very lonely. I didn't get that kind of, I really love the collaborative aspect of filmmaking. I love working with people. And that first year, it just felt like everybody was just kind of like on their own path, and they weren't really kind of looking for that. And then the second year is when I met Sean and Josh. I had known from high school, but we weren't like friends or anything. I just knew him. He was like a year ahead of me. And when we crossed paths just randomly one day, and Josh had heard that I had been making short films from even before school, and Josh being the sort of like the hustler that he is and he was kind of like, let's make something happen here, because you've made some short films, I've got a script, Sean is Sean's down to produce with me, and so that's when the conversation started. And what we just basically kind of agreed to is, we agreed to this idea, kind of what Mona and Brady talked about, that sort of notion that like, who here is ready to go and will produce for you. Sean and Josh would produce for me, and then I would pair up with Josh to produce for Sean. And that was the idea. And I think that the reason it worked was because we really just wanted to make movies, and we really just saw this as the way. And it was we did put our ego aside, because we just kind of needed to. It's like, I was just more in a place to be the first one to make a feature. And Sean and Josh didn't have that, weren't there yet. And so, yeah, I mean, it just worked. And I think the reason why it worked really well with us at that point was we were developing a partnership and a friendship at the same time. We didn't plan that. We just kind of started to be that way. And yeah, and the other thing we did, the other reason why it worked for as long as it did was we were very serious about splitting every dollar 3 ways. And in the beginning, that was key. It was like, when one's working and making money, even if the other 2 aren't involved, because we were doing our own films together, but then between the films we had to make something to sustain. And so we would do like little short form stuff, and no matter who was doing it, the other 2 would benefit. They would get 2/3 of it, and that supported us, and it worked all around. So if Sean was making money, we'd all make money, and we saw it as an investment in each other. And that was a really beautiful idea that worked for a long time. And then when it started to sort of get out of balance, we talked about it, and we were able to figure out another way to make splitting up money work, and not 3 ways. So it was conversation. We had a lot of fights. We really were adamant about telling each other what we felt about each other when we were feeling it. And we were just super supportive of one another at that time.
That's amazing. So you guys all were a little yin in a sense, like of,
I guess so.
Practicing nonviolent communication, or whatever.
Yeah.
But you were really, a very much an inspiration for so many filmmakers that came after you. I mean, I've had a number of PAs or office people who've gone on who came out of NYU or other film schools that were all very, like you guys were their role models, and started the collaboration aspect as well, because it's such a great model. And it really should be utilized more, because when you think about it, film is, this is one of the reasons we started Film Roundtable, was to really, bring to the forefront of what a collaboration filmmaking is. Like, it's really not just about the director or the writer or the actors, and they seem to be the ones who, get most of the accolades, where there's just, a film wouldn't be made without all of the other people that come, below that triangle. And I think that's great. And I think it also makes it less daunting, right? If you have a group of people that are going to work on things with you together,
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting and really great advice for people, if they have other people who are interested in film, to like go at it together, and try things.
Yeah, that was the number one thing I say to film students, young filmmakers, is, don't sort of put your ego aside, and know that, you'll be strong, you'll be stronger working as a group than you will be on your own. And the reality is you can't make a movie on your own. And so embrace that. And from the point of the beginning,
Mhm.
and you'll have a better chance of succeeding. And the other thing was, you know, we were never sort of out of things to do, because we were always thinking about story, we were always thinking about filmmaking, because if it wasn't my own film, I was thinking about Sean's, and I was thinking about Josh's, or, you know, eventually we were thinking about other filmmakers that we were helping out. So.
And I think it transcends like your partnership with them like, I think people that are very guarded of their work, and they won't share it, or like, you can't read it until it's ready, or you can't watch a cut until it's ready. They're just missing out on like great collaboration. Like, it's so helpful, like for us, that most of our friends in New York work in film. It's just like use their eyes and their talent, and like have them watch your stuff and show it, even if it's embarrassing, or, you know, it's not in a good place, because you're gonna get great things out of it. So I think like letting your guard down in terms of collaboration really helps the process.
Yeah, and also I think, just to, you know, bring Brady into this, is Brady was really part of a borderline as well. I remember, you know, just being an actor, and I know maybe editing, right? Didn't you help edit? Were you involved in some editing?
Two Gates of Sleep, which is a movie that that Borderline produced for another filmmaker that was outside of the main group, called Alistair Banks Griffin. Yeah.
And
I mean, that's where Brady and I really bonded. You know, we bonded. We met Brady through Banks Griffin, and then it was at Sundance with Protect You and Me that where Brady and I really got close. And then you know, it was like Brady's just an amazing filmmaker, and that's, we really got close through the editing process of Two Gates of Sleep.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is very interesting about Borderline, and I think that, you know, this had a lot to do with Joshua Mann's kind of spirit and tenacity, but really, like, everybody was like, would make a movie, like, once everyone had decided to make a movie, like, the movie was getting made. So whether you got $300,000 for the movie, or $400,000 for the movie, or $800,000 for the movie, it's like, you know, like, we did them no matter what. And I think that you know, has had a major impact on my approach, because, you know, you always start off with a budget that is usually double, or even a little more than double of what you end up with. And, you know, I spend most of my life talking the rest of my team on these movies off of a ledge, because people feel like, well, it's just impossible, we're dead in the water. And my feeling is, like, movies get made as long as you don't stop making them. And, like, you make them, like, no matter, I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'll shoot the last 15 minutes of the movie on an iPhone and it'll be better for it, you know, like. And I think that but what's interesting is to sort of, like, everyone that was a part of that group was also very stubborn. So the movies were formalist movies, meaning that they were really not shot on iPhones, and yet there was still a way for them to be formally daring and uncompromising and still not cost a lot of money. And so, I mean, and then it was definitely like trial by fire, but there's a lot of stuff that even now, you know, when I'm making movies that have, you know, much bigger budgets than we had back then, I'm still like, why the fuck does, like, so-and-so have a trailer? Like, fuck the trailer. Like, I mean, that's insane. I was like, it cost me $90,000 to service that fucking trailer and travel that fucking trailer. And it's, like, so liberating to just like, when and people are like, well, you know, I mean, if we get rid of their trailer, you know, we're gonna have to get rid of your trailer. And I'm like, I don't want a fucking trailer.
What director ever goes to their trailer?
Yeah.
Directors.
No one. No. It smells like
like, we need to get it in the contract. We got to get your trailer. And you're like, okay, get it in the contract, but I'm never going to go into it. They're like,
Oh,
okay,
It's only
we got
because
your room. We got your room on a triple bangy. You're like, all right, great, cool.
no, but everything is like that, where you sort at a certain point, then you start going through and you're looking at transpo and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so how can we save some money with transpo? And it's like, well, it's like not every single person in the cast use their own car. I'm like, let's put, like 2 people in a van, like, they'll be fine. And so it's just
and everyone is fine with that. So if you actually like, there's really
Exactly,
the only
exactly.
way I think and because of the way we all started making movies is that we really were such a big part of building our budgets and making it work with the money that we had. Then I think I think that's something you take with you as you go, and as you have more money, and as you have more money to make a movie, you really are just like, I still am not going to have this added ridiculous luxury that doesn't go on screen.
As a story
Yeah.
that we often reminisce about, Antonio and I, is when we were making Simon Killer in Paris, all of us were incredibly broke. I mean, really, really broke. And we were living and working in a fairly expensive city. And I remember that I went to Antonio's partner Josh, and I asked him for money. I asked him for €2. and he said, "What do you need €2 for?" And I was like, I don't know. I just want like a pan chocolat or something. Like, I'm fucking hungry, dude. And he was like, "What do you need a fucking pan chocolat for?" He's like, "We got spaghetti in the fridge."
Yeah, he goes, I'll boil an egg. I'll boil an egg. I'll boil an egg. I shared a bed with my co-editor, who was my friend from actuality, because I didn't have room. Me and him were sleeping like he was like.
Babak was also he was
a brilliant filmmaker from Iran. He came to help on that movie, another sort of part of like this sort of collaborative family. It's just like we all help whenever we needed someone to help edit the movie, and he came from London, and we didn't have an extra room, so the edit room was our bedroom for me and Babak, and there was one bed, and we shared that bed for like 20 days, and just did what we had to do.
It was a privilege, and we woke up every day, and we were.
Yeah. When I was a kid.
Well, just to put this in there and to caveat, Brady's like my brother. He and I shared a bed at Sundance for protection.
Oh my God, that's right.
Gordon Levitt's place that Fox gave him for like 500 Days of Summer or something, right? Didn't we?
Yeah, I forgot about that, but that's so right. Yeah.
My husband.
Sorry.
No.
So the first time that Brady, the first night that we met, like the first time we hang out, Brady, we ended up we slept in the same bed. We fell asleep in the same bed in Sundance. Jack Daniels.
That I then left.
Every time that I get on the phone with an actor's agent and they start bitching about them not, they're only flying business class and so they should be flying first class. I'm always like, well, they could be sharing a bed with me. There's a precedent for that.
Dude, like, past me to Vera, you can't go down that road at all. You're just like,
I'm gonna try that angle.
Yeah.
See how far it gets me.
See how that goes.
Or Babak.
Yeah.
I think this is like an important thing to note, that the three of you, Mona, Brady, and Antonio, as directors, are also very much producers. Obviously, Antonio, you've been producing for a long time with your other partners, and not a lot of directors are like that. Like, not a lot of directors are super involved in every line number on their budget and how it should be used. And I think that it's really, that's a valuable piece of information for up and coming directors to really take note of that and really learn where everything is going on a job, on a film, because you can, you have the power a little bit to move things around and see exactly what you need and not let it be a runaway train. And I remember I think it was when Brady was trying to finance Vox Lux, and he was doing it really alone, except for a couple of different line producers who were bidding the job out for him or budgeting it. And he was taking on so much. And I remember talking to him about like, why don't you just get somebody who can like help you? And, you were very much like, I need to know where this money's going. Like,
Yeah,
so much of the money is going above the line.
One thing that's very interesting is that, of course, on the one hand, like, the years since I started making my own films, and since I met Mona, and since we started a family together, we have richer lives. Like, we have better lives, and I would say happier lives overall. But really, I mean, the stress of making these movies that are very ambitious, especially like in a period of time where like the fate of the kind of big screen movie going experience is so up in the air now this year more than ever. Which means that you're always being asked for more and more and more, and being given less to actually achieve it. But I think that if there were any option for me to not be involved with every single line item of the budget, which takes years to develop and actualize, I'd get probably about 60 or 70% of my free time back. However, part of the reason that the movies are uncompromising, for better or for worse, meaning that if people like them or they hate them, they are uncompromised movies. And the reason that they're uncompromised is really because the power is in the budget. And so if someone is giving you a hard time about spending $3,000 or $4,000 on a lens that you need to special order for that day, and you happen to know that $4,000 was spent on a dinner that no one needed to attend the night before, then you are in a powerful position to say, fuck that. And I think that, it's like, I'm not stingy in any other aspect of my life, but like the movies, like I suddenly become like, it's like it's my little piggy bank,
Yeah, but it is. And I think that within that lies the freedom to make the creative choices that you want.
And you make compromises, but you make compromises that you also, you say, okay, like I move this sand around in the box. What am I left with? Okay, we have a little less film to shoot with tomorrow. Is it like, is it safe for me to give that up? And then, once people work with you for a little while and they realize that when you say, I need you to do this, pull the trigger, order the fucking thing. And then tomorrow you'll see, we're only going to shoot 4,000 feet as opposed to 7,000 feet or 8,000 feet. And then if you do that enough times, people also start to trust you.
Yeah.
And so it's always a trust building exercise, and because you're always working with new people. But anyway, just to take this back to where it all began, I do think what's very interesting is that I obviously had worked for many, many years on many movies with Greg Araki and Michael Haneke and all sorts with all sorts of filmmakers and made a lot of different kinds of movies. But Borderline, I think that making those movies, I think I really metabolized something that I had never been exposed to before. Because when you're acting in a movie, you are really in a bubble. And now I really appreciate what a bubble I was in, because I'm like, oh fuck, like now I'm like in the machine room and it's hot down here. So I think that it sort of is like, that was a very interesting merger of gaining production experience, because there was no middleman on those movies, because the crews were too small, the films were just too too inexpensive.
Yeah.
And I remember actually I asked Antonio to sit down and have a coffee with me right before I made my first film. Do you remember that? And
Yeah.
Antonio kind of like, because I said, I have
Did
all
he
these
did he
things.
show up?
Yeah, he did. He said, you're good to go, just do it. It was kind of like, I was like, I think, can you guys help me out? I don't know. I was like, I have this chunk of money and I have this plan. I have this, I had all these bits and pieces sort of together. And he was just like, just do it. Like, it'll be fine.
Yeah. That was kind of the attitude we had. I mean, I remember Sean, before Martha, we were really struggling to get Martha made, and we had decided to make a short film that Sean had written called Mary Last Scene, and we had $500 on a credit card. That was all we had. And Sean, who was always the most financially responsible one of the three of us, was like, I don't know if we should make, it's literally the last $500 we have. I don't know if we should make it. I was like, what else are we going to do with that $500? Let's go make this movie. And we did, and we did it for $500. And it was like, and then there would be a restaurant where they wouldn't accept a credit card. And then Josh had figured out some way to use a credit card somewhere else to get $20 from the store so they could pay for the Chinese food to feed the crew. And it was just like, you kind of go, all right, well, like, we got each other, we've got a camera, we've got a location, and we have $500. Let's make a movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there is no one formula, right? It's kind of what works for the individuals and how you kind of have to push your comfort zone a little bit of what you're willing to do, and maybe, and then you discover that space that you have, like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can bet on $500 and go make something, and that's better than spending that money on something else, and instead we get to create together. I wanted to talk to Mona for a second because she finished her film before quarantine hit and was actually able to get it done during quarantine and post, which really was a collaboration, because I think, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of quarantined with your team or with some of your team, right, in a house and on Long Island, and got it finished, right, with your editor, with some of the actors, obviously with Brady and your daughter. But how did that rally together to happen?
So basically, I had finished the edit, thank God.
Okay.
So I just locked the edit. And
Finished the edit before March?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finished the edit before March. So I was doing the music and the sound and color and the effects and everything. That's what I had left. And ADR, some of the ADR and stuff like that. So I saw what's happening in Norway, and the plan all along was to finish the sound mix in Long Island with my sound editor, because he has a studio out there. So Leslie and I were always going to go out there. But then when I saw what's happening in Norway and how the lockdown was happening there, I basically was like, okay, I told one of my actors to come with us, Chris Abbott, to come out there so that I could finish his ATR and also just, capture him to stay with us and entertain us with his lovely personality. And then brought Brady and our daughter. And then we reached out to Sofia and Antonio and said, can you guys, if you guys quarantine and completely isolate for 2 weeks, can you come and join us? Because Antonio and Sofia were also working on finishing Devil all the time. And Antonio was in a writer's room. So we basically set up a mini pod together where we could share childcare and therefore also work, because we were just us together. So we would take turns watching the kids and then finishing the movies. So I got
2 months, the four of us.
Yeah.
Brady's mom and Chris Abbott.
Brady and I usually did like morning shifts with the kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
mornings. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you guys.
it was the only way we would have survived through quarantine. I think we would have gone.
It was the only
And the
way because we
food-
were all working full time. Sophia
Yeah.
was editing. Like you had a ton of work, and I was either on Zoom or in person with our editor, who was also in our pod, sound editor.
In our pod.
Yeah, like in our little yeah.
No, that's what it's called.
Yeah, in our pod.
It's just
so
it's a funny new turn of phrase.
I know, right? So, but this is So we somehow, because we set it up like this, we just basically extended this Airbnb that production had gotten for us, and just kept on staying there, so that we could alternate childcare and just keep on working during that period. So somehow we got to finish our movies. But we were tearing our hair out, all of us, trying to look at VFX on an iPad and trying to listen to a mix on headphones, trying to finish your film on a computer when that was not how it was intended to be seen. It's really difficult, very difficult. It was very frustrating. But luckily,
color correcting. Weren't you doing it?
Well, the cool thing was that in the end, we were trying to do color on just remote, but then luckily at the very end, right before Venice, New York opened up again, and they allowed us to get back into the studio. So then we were with masks on, far apart, able to be in the theater, me and my colorist, and then my DP in Paris in a different theater. And I think Tony did the same thing.
Yeah, with the same colorings.
Yeah, same colors.
Yeah, and same colorists. And luckily we figured out that you could, because we were how are we going to know what my DP is pointing at? Because he's in a different room and can't point at the screen with the laser. But luckily we could move, my colorist could move the mouse on the image, and we can be is it that part? And then we could communicate that way on the phone for hours and hours, and then finally got to get to finish the film. But yeah,
Intense.
Yeah. The quarantine was the ultimate if this is husband wife collaboration. This was weird. We were sister wives. We were some weird kind of community where they were the kids were so confused. My kid was calling Brady's mom grandma. We were and I was it really felt some weird kind of religious community.
Antonio and Sofia's son Emilio, he started speaking a little bit of Norwegian.
It was I was why isn't Antonio letting Emilio ut? Because he kept saying ut, and I was why is he just letting him outside? And I was oh, he's just he wants to go outside.
How was that for your guys' relationship? On top, the stress of finishing a film, quarantine, COVID. I feel 2020 has been full of challenges on so many levels.
It was so sexy.
Yeah. It was
It was great,
Yeah, it was a pretty good test of our friendship.
Yeah, because of our marriage and
That's
all
a lot of
that.
sweatpants.
We decided to make a short film for Netflix.
Yeah, we made a short film for Netflix that sort of consumed our lives while we were also trying to finish our movies, also writing.
No, but honestly, it would have been impossible if we were back in the city and we didn't have each other's support. When we really quarantined, me and Antonio, before we met, when meet you guys, we were stay with the three of me, Antonio, and the baby stayed in the house for 2 weeks without leaving, and we live in a tiny Brooklyn apartment, and it was
insane.
It was actually insane. I have pictures where my house just looks like a fucking war zone. It's just it was so intense. I can for anyone that stayed behind the entire time and didn't have help. Yeah. I don't know how they did it. I really don't.
It's sort of on a bigger, it goes back to the very beginning, sort of, the sort of working so closely with someone can be challenging, but then there's also just like it can be the reason you get through something. I mean, and the reason I think we all survived and came out of it, like the quarantine with all our work done and sort of our kids sort of reasonably normal, was because we supported each other so much through that process.
We had a pretty good time.
Yeah.
We had a good
We
time.
were under a lot of stress, but we had a pretty good time.
There was a lot of alcohol in the house. a lot of
I haven't touched a Negroni since I left that house.
No, I mean, but I think Antonio is right. I think that the whole sort of idea that you are, that you rely on a lot of people when you make a movie, and that you can ask for help, and if you are lucky enough to have some people around you wants to contribute to that and work with you, then to really utilize that as much as possible, I think is really, really key. And also, during these difficult times like now, to be able to rely on some other people to help with, because you can't really work if you are taking care of children full time, like whatever, it doesn't work, at least not with our kids. That's not possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I really felt we were in Brooklyn the whole time. Like I was in Egypt until March 13th, and I flew in from Egypt, and then was basically kind of keeping me at bay of what was actually happening in the US while I was in Egypt. I was like living in a whole other universe. And I came back, and I remember I flew back and got in that night, and I was like, can we go out to dinner? He's like, I'm not sure what you don't understand about quarantine. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was like, we did not leave our house. We did not get out of New York from that day until July 13th or something, where we finally went camping for 2 days. And I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. And it was really hard. Like, it was really hard. I thought at first, I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy my kids aren't little. But it was also really hard with that age kids of like.
I think that is a worse age.
It was intense.
The reason is
it was intense.
But we spoke to a friend of ours that shall remain anonymous, who had an older teenager that had probably lost their virginity like a few days before this happened.
Oh my God.
And then suddenly was kept from seeing their girlfriend for months. So it's just like, this sort of, and so they were fucking losing their mind. They were crying all the time, and you don't understand how much I need him and her.
It's hard.
What a nightmare.
It's hard. I think for like each age has its own very specific challenges, but I think when they're older, it's harder for the kids themselves. Or like Ada and Emilia, we could trick them into some sort of normalcy, or And if they didn't have a child, it would have been so much harder.
Yeah. And I think also having older kids, they're very aware of the parents' patterns too. And then they call you on that shit all the time, So there's like no escape from the mirror. Like it's constantly in your face, like, oh my God.
Oh, I should use my phone less? Fuck off.
Yeah. And it was interesting though. Like it was interesting how we went through cycles, there were really great times where we were really bonding. And there were times, as my son Zephyr would say, I'm really surprised we haven't killed each other all yet, and like it was a lot of going back and forth. But it was an amazing experience, and I think we definitely had a chance to revisit at a time with our children when they're ready to really separate, and you kind of have a chance to be like, oh, let's take these moments and really try to appreciate them. But it definitely wasn't easy, especially kids at this age, it's hard for them to see the forest between the trees, as far as like the scope of what's happening in the world. And looking at that in a perspective. And I think that brings up, I think kids these days, especially in this age range, are having a lot of anxiety because they don't have a perspective, and obviously we don't either. I mean, 2020 is like unprecedented. Trump was unprecedented, I mean, it just, like the floor just keeps dropping.
You just said was.
Did I say what?
Trump was unprecedented.
I'm glad.
It feels really good.
Past tense feels amazing.
It was unintentional. It came out that way. So that's
No. I just, anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Yeah. So Sophia and Antonio, like, what are you're pregnant, obviously, Sophia. Congratulations. When are you due?
I'm due in January. That was
Uh-huh.
this was a COVID lockdown accident that happened in the pod.
In the pod.
It was really funny also because we were drinking a lot of wine at night, and I was like, "Did anyone else like threw up last night?" I think I ate something that like sat wrong with me. And when I was like, "I think you're pregnant," I was like, "I am not." And Mona got me a test, and I was very. That changed the dynamic too.
Yeah, that changed the dynamic.
I got you a test. I actually got you a test. And then I gave it to Mona to give to you.
Brady got it, and also I was so sure that I wasn't pregnant that I didn't do the test for like 6 days, and then one day I went to pee in the morning and I did it, and I left it in the bathroom and I forgot about it, and I went back to bed, and then I like got up an hour later and I was like, oh fuck. And that's how pregnant I thought I was. Because with Emilio it was impossible to get pregnant. Well, okay. But yeah.
And are you guys staying in Chile for a while?
Yeah, we're staying in Chile. We're having the baby here. Yeah, we decided to come here because we wanted to try to skip the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Antonio's writing, so he could do it from here. Mm-hmm. And here I have support from my family, and I just wasn't looking forward to be stuck in quarantine in my apartment with a toddler and a newborn in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
So we got lucky, and we couldn't get into Chile because Antonio and Emilio don't have citizenship, and they wouldn't let them in. So it was really hard to leave New York. It took us like a while, and we finally managed. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're gonna have the baby here.
Good. Yeah, I was. One thing I've spent a lot of, it was interesting, you guys were talking about how you couldn't have really survived quarantine without potting together and like having that support. And that's one thing that's come really clear to me. And I don't know if it will come into fruition, but that it's so necessary, right? Like even with older kids, like I was like, oh my God, if we only had like a big piece of property where people could build houses kind of far away from each other, but then you could have like a communal spot. And not that I want to be in a commune at all, but just to be like kind of pod together. People could take the kids, the women could all hang out, the men could all hang out. You could have time with your partner alone. You could have help with meals. Like I haven't cooked so much in my life in the last like 8 months. And it would be great. Like that's kind of what
we were like on Silo and looking at houses upstate, like fantasizing about places that we could not.
We were afford. Like, let's just keep this caravan. Let's just keep it going for a year. Yeah, where are we moving next?
Brady was cooking every night.
Yeah, that's a treat. Yeah,
tea after dinner.
We have a question. I'm not quite sure who it's directed towards, but someone asked. And maybe Brady, but not to get political, but you've made politically aware films. And I'm curious how on the front burner for you politics is when conceiving a story. In other words, are you looking to tell stories that are timely or timeless? It's an interesting question.
Who would like to take this one?
I think that you know, with I think when Brady and I set out to write something, we're always looking for something that is timeless. But if you're lucky, what you are concerned about, what you are interested in, what you think is important, speaks to your time as well. But you know, making something that is for this fall or next spring is, you know, it's too much of an undertaking to make something that's supposed to be for right now. It has to be something that you think is worthwhile spending years and years on, and that is interesting, and that you feel is important for years and years. And I think that that, you know, some of the stories that we approach, you know, they really do, there are a lot about history and looking back at history and how history points to the present day, even if it's recent history like Vox Lux, or much further, you know, like, or even the new film that we wrote together that Brady's directing now called The Brutalist, which is a historic piece as well. But I, you know, we are always trying to find how it connects to present day as well.
Yes, I would say that that politics, you know, it's everyday stuff, like, you know, pages of newspapers they shed. I'm more interested in really what comes or what's left after politics, meaning, like, you know, what are the remnants are of or you know, the aftermath. I think that generations are defined by those aftermaths. And I am not that interested in you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. I'm only interested in the result of that infighting. And I think that there is, you know, in the idea for with cinema is that it's supposed to transcend politics, and it's supposed to transcend time, because, you know, you are able to reorganize time. You are able to fit it inside of 2 hours or 3 hours. You stack it up. You start at the end and you move back to the beginning. You invert everything. Mm-hmm. For me, cinema is time travel, and or the closest thing that we have, and therefore, you know, I'm interested in stories that reflect cinema and reflect the very essence of the tool. You are it is a sort of architecture that uses time as its fundamental element. Therefore, I am very interested in making work which is defiantly apolitical in a way, by being devoted to what politics built up and or destroyed. And that is a very long answer to a very, very complicated question. But if the question was for me, which is not, we're not even sure, that would be my response to it.
The response was such thoughtful answers to my question about politics. Thank you.
A+. You got it. It would be a shame if the response was wrong guy.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing about your movies. I feel how I don't even know how to put it into words, but how you're taking on something that's happening in the moment or has been happening, but are, you know, structuring it in in a non-obvious sort of way. Does that make sense? You know, with Childhood of the Leader, which was that pre-Trump?
Yes,
Or
it's
was that
pre-Trump.
it was pre-Trump, right? A little
and the
foreshadowing. No.
Yes, I mean, you know, it is clearly something to think about at that particular time. But
Yeah, I mean,
we have to.
childhood is interesting because it's a virtual history.
Yes, it's not an actual.
that imagines that the child of a European parent and an American parent becomes an autocrat. Now, the reason that we chose to have this character, you know, come from two different lineages, is that at the end of the day, where you're from or where it's happening is more or less unimportant. It might, you know, it might give specific shape to the way you are the way that you are able to enact on your autocracy. However, basically, whether we are talking about Bolsonaro or Trump or our good pal Victor in Hungary, who was the first person to build a wall, you know, they're all the same. And that movie was about the fact that it's kind of irrelevant, you know, where this is or who this is, because it's an ideology which is universal.
And I think that's true to all like storytelling, that like when you tap into something that's authentic and real or specific, it and that happens a lot, I think, with like international cinema. Like the movies that break through tend to be the one that tap into something that it's universal, even though it's very particular. And I think, yeah, with politics the same. It's like if you tap into something that's like truthful to, it's gonna like translate like time or realities, because it's just bigger than that.
Yeah, and there's just not that many different formulas for it too. It sort of is like, you know, it's always like some egomaniac that is exploiting people at a very vulnerable moment in time in their history. And so, you know, that's what happened to us. It's amazing that we now know that it can happen to us, and it did happen to us, and next time it could be worse. And so, you know, I mean, and we're obviously not out of the weeds yet. I mean, who knows how people respond to Biden's absolute unequivocal victory because of how much doubt the current president has sown about this election. However, you know, I really do think that things can always get worse, and I think that this is. I think we need to change policies. I think we need to talk about new checks and balances to make sure that this brand of autocracy never takes hold of the United States of America ever again.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And I think that film was very much of like the manual of how to raise a narcissist or how to create a narcissist. And it's kind of an interesting, you know, it's a manual that if you look back in any sort of autocratic leaders, you know, they kind of have all similar upbringings in a lot of ways. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, something that it's interesting is it's interesting to talk about, because I haven't talked about this movie in a long time, actually. I mean, probably since we were doing press for the movie when it came out 6 years ago or something. But for us, that movie was always about setting a stage for where maybe it's this that made the character, you know, move in that direction, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's this, or perhaps you know, it wasn't one thing, or it was none of those things. You know, I mean, it's like, it is an unanswerable question in a way. I mean, we actually were, the idea was to start with this sort of Freudian psychology that you then start muddying as the movie, you know, proceeds.
I loved working on the character of the mother in that film. We kept doing passes and passes on that character, really like looking at my grandmother and my grandmother's grandmother and our family history as well, and which is like a long line of women wanting to study, a long line of intellectuals who were not allowed to have the opportunity to study, or to pursue that, and sort of, I mean, obviously, again, as Brady said, what we looked at, well, we didn't say that, oh, well, he had a bad mother, so therefore he became a fascist leader. Like that would be ridiculous. But to say that all of these components, you know, the father figure, the mother figure, the society around him, you know, everything that was happening,
everything made him do it.
Everything, the whole society, everything is history is responsible for this.
This is the last thing I'll say about it, so we can move on. But it's just only interesting given Biden's win today, which is that the conclusion of Camus' The Stranger, which is, you know, for anyone that has not read it, is about somebody who commits a crime which is out of character for them to commit, a murder, and it sort of builds to a moment when the character is being interrogated, and he finally exclaims, you know, they're like, "What made you do it?" And he says, "Well, it was so hot that day. You know, it was so hot." And everyone says, "Well, what does that have to do with anything?" He said, "Well, I was very uncomfortable. I had put on something that was too warm to be on the beach that day, and the sun was in my eyes, and I was in possession of a pistol, and you know, I'm not accustomed to handling a pistol, and you know, and suddenly there was this silhouette coming at me, and I had sweat in my eyes, and then I pulled the trigger, and then the sound of the bullet coming out of the chamber was so frightening that I pulled it again and again and again and again." And what's so interesting about Camus' sort of take on what makes us do it, what we do, is that sometimes it's just the weather. And I think that is like a chilling reality that we must all sort of confront, which is that, I mean, sometimes if you ever snap at your kid, or you snap at your, you know, wife or husband, and you're like, you're not sure why. It's like, oh my God, actually, it's a little hot in here, isn't it? or whatever. And I think it's interesting that something that minutia could sort of define major political happenings.
Well, I mean, if you go back to Trump, it's like, does the moment that he decides to be president happen at that dinner where Obama makes fun of him? Is that the moment that, like, that little jab at his ego just sets him off on this path? It's that little blip, that laugh was like it.
Yeah, and the thing that's strange about that guy is that because he's lived so much of his life in public, it actually is easier than other public figures to be that reductive. However, because he can't help but constantly tell everybody what he's thinking all the time, he actually can sort of trace these things back to their origins. I mean, the problem with Donald Trump is really, I mean, this is a weird thing, which is that it's really going to be hard to make the drama that Donald Trump deserves, because he's so absurd. And so it's really hard to figure out how to treat it tonally.
Yeah, no one wants to make that movie. It's very tricky.
But I also feel like Donald Trump is a reflection of his constituency. You know what I mean? So he's so many things. Like, and that could be an interesting way to tell the story of Donald Trump, is not necessarily through, you know, a biopic on Donald Trump. It's a reflection of where we are in America.
I mean, I don't think it's just his constituency, because I feel like he is a reflection of where and who we are as a whole to some degree. Because
Totally.
and not in every you know sense, of course. But I do think it's interesting that, you know, a lot of his sort of baseness and ugliness is relatable, and his narcissism, especially like when all of us, you know, and we're all adults, but all of us spend time on Instagram and Twitter and all this fucking shit, and we're like and pass judgment on those around. All of us are guilty of it. And so it is very, very strange to see the physical manifestation of what I believe is the worst, and maybe more importantly, the most pathetic of us.
Yeah, and how he keeps shifting. You know, he kind of shifts into the reflection of what we are putting out there, you know, as a society. You know, especially the comfort of white people, you know, how comfortable we are in our white privilege. You know, it's even the most progressive liberals who are white have a hard time looking at how deeply they need to shift and change to make the changes that have to happen in this country and in our systemic racism. And it's interesting. It's an interesting time. I mean, it's interesting how many people voted for Trump in this election after 4 years, you know, that they were able to look the other way.
I know, it's insane.
More than last time.
People love him. I mean, they, you know, they love him, and it's interesting. But I think that it was an interesting week, that it wasn't that we had this week to really sit and think about, like, oh my God, look at where we are. You know, I think if it was such an immediate, like a landslide, you know, we wouldn't have been sitting in this discomfort all week and really analyzing, like, oh my God, like, I know this is something I think about a lot. And I know how shocked and saddened I was to think of how many people came out and voted for him after he's the most horrible, despicable person. And then that like I had so much more faith in humanity, you know? And I think this week has been really interesting to sit with that and be like, oh my God, we have so much work to do. We have so much work to do. And, you know, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how we move forward. And that I hope, you know, Biden isn't just a Band-Aid, you know, on the wounds that have been collecting. There is someone had responded about Brady's Camus comment and said how much she loves Camus and The Stranger. And she said that people have been misquoting it on social media in the last 48 hours to make the exact opposite argument that Brady just made. And that's interesting. But anyway, yeah. So, but it is a good day. I mean, we should all be. Really
I think the one thing that is really strange is that what I'm interested in terms of these numbers, in terms of, you know, 70 million people voting for Donald Trump, is that you know, I think that, you know, only 30 million of them can be assholes. So who is everyone else? And I think that it's very, I mean, because he really has such a strong base that's really just his, it's an echo chamber. So I'm not interested in the echo chamber. I am interested in everyone that is just outside of the echo chamber. I'm in because that really deserve everyone's ear and attention. I mean, as those people are mourning this loss, we really need to try to dial in to why, because I refuse to believe that I can certainly believe that you know the echo chamber is really that bigoted. It's hard for me to imagine that everyone else is, and so and if they are, it's you know at least once or twice removed. So I just think I really want to know. I want to know why so many elderly people did not feel personally attacked by being thrown to the wolves for the economy, which, by the way, it wouldn't be effective for the economy anyhow. So that's what it's this weird thing. It's like, well, get everybody healthy, get everyone safe. We're not going to have to, handle this, and then the economy can recover. But one thing must come before the other. We don't have to choose. We're choosing the economy to choose ourselves, to choose our humanity. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I'm interested to read a lot about how everyone's feeling over the next few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say it's a strange situation, I think, for me and Sofia, having spent most of our adult life in America, but not being citizens. And being from someplace else, and feeling, very like the state, New York is our home, and it's a place where we gotten to work, where we've had opportunities to work. That's been really welcoming creatively in so many ways, and then all of a sudden feeling like incredibly rejected by that culture, and not being able to vote or sort of participate in that. It's been bizarre experience.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for people.
Yeah, in Chile, we just went through a big referendum 2 weeks ago about doing a new constitution, during a democracy, because there's been a huge social disrupt that started last year because of just inequity and the fake perception that we live in this very modern country and super developed for the region, and that it's just all a mirage inside a very small elite. And it's been very I was if the referendum, and the referendum passed with 80%, which was no one saw it coming, that it was going to be that big. So it's very encouraging. And part of me thought that was going to happen too in America. I got excited that maybe the slogan in Chile was Chile despertó, Chile awoken.
Yeah. Chile woke up.
Woke up, yeah. I still can't speak English. So I thought that was going to happen too, or maybe hoped that it was going to happen with the election. And then, of course, it didn't. And it's just a slap in the face of okay, this is the country that I live in, and the country that, my son's American. He's not even Chilean yet. It's crazy. But I think Brady is saying something very true, that it's important to get out of the echo chamber. And for us too, we were just drove back from the beach to Santiago, and we were listening to Pod Save America, and it just felt like this is it's just such a another echo chamber. That
I feel there was some. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking it's almost like in Instagram. It's for every one person that you choose to be a friend, it should read your algorithm and put you with the exact opposite person. And then sort of for every friend you should also have another person that you're following that believes completely different shit than you. Because the problem is when you go on Instagram and you're scrolling through your Instagram, and it's just this kind of you're everybody thinks the way that I do, and
everybody
is on the same page.
And the algorithm suggests
the algorithm suggesting other people that think like you, and it's just well, then we're all going to we're all in an echo chamber, and why don't we just sort of force ourselves to get out of this echo chamber and actually start having this conversation?
Like the Christopher Nolan Social Network.
Social network. It costs $300 million.
I'm a dad. I'm allowed to make dad jokes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to, it's almost 1:30, so we've had a really great, nice, long talk. I would love it if maybe Mona and Sophia could, if they have any, pointers, advice, just a few words and a couple sentences on like out there for our female filmmakers, our female editors, production designers, whomever is listening, just how you balance the motherhood work thing, and any sort of advice you'd want to pass on, or like me, I've had to learn over time, how to balance it and sometimes wing it. But like, do you feel like you could offer something up from your experience?
I think, well, a little bit what we talked about before of like really seeking out for like taking in all the help that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think it's hard, but it's also possible, and it's very gratifying to know that you can do it. And I think, I don't know, this is gonna sound like horrible, but like invest in like, I think the mistake, because it's not forever, like eventually kids are gonna go to school like full time, and then you're gonna be able to like manage to go back into some sort of like routine that allows you to work and be a mother. But I think that the beginning of it is the hardest part. And I think if you can like, if you're able, because I know that we're also very privileged to be able to do it, like to like seek resources that like allowed you to not put your career like in a drawer for like 5 years, I think do it, like whatever it takes, even if it takes like living in a tiny apartment, spend that money on a nanny so you can like go to work. I think for us, we like kind of like made the decision that we weren't gonna like we weren't gonna just like sacrifice either of our careers, and we're gonna find a way to balance it out, like between us and our time, and be like, I also, like me as a mom, Antonio, I also need time. So now you're gonna have to like the next 3 months, like my job is a project priority, you figure it out. Or like we're gonna spend an amount of money that sounds insane in putting Emilio in daycare, even like, and then see where we get that money back, and like just like prioritize so you can like invest in yourself. So then, because I feel if not, it's just so hard to like it's so unfair to women that to have to choose, like to be like, I'm either a mother or work. So like, just like figure out a way to find the balance. And I think it's compromising with your partner, it's doing the extra effort, it's seeking for help, it's throwing money at it too, if you have to, and see how you compensate that. We haven't taken a trip in forever, or we haven't, like it's funny, but like just by living in New York, like the amount of money you save by not being able to go out, you can put that into like daycare. I don't know, like I think it's possible. It's hard. It's definitely hard, but I think it's possible, and I think it has a lot to do with yeah, I don't know. It's a balancing act. I think that's what it is, but it's definitely possible. And I say that with one. I have no idea what's gonna happen next year. Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you.
see.
Yeah, I think if you're applying for a job, or if you got a job, don't be afraid to tell your director or producer that you're a parent.
For sure. Yeah.
And because if somebody said, hey, which has happened a lot, I just had a baby, but I would love to be your script, or I would love to be your first AD, but I just had a kid. then I would say, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to bring my kid and you bring your kid, and let's get, a situation set up on set where we can maybe share some childcare. Do you want to share a nanny? It's not, I think often a lot, especially women, are feeling that if you say I'm a mother and I would love to be able to be a mother and do my job, which required traveling and relocating to a different place or something like that, and I want to bring my baby or toddler with me or kid, and now because of remote learning, you can actually bring your kid to set some production. It would not, for me, that, and for Brady or Antonia or Sofia, that would never be a problem. We would say, okay, cool, let's see who else wants to bring their kids, and let's figure out like a little like child pod or something like that. So I think bringing that to the people that you're working with is really important, and also bringing that, not being afraid as a director, as a female director, to saying that being able to parent while doing your job is also important. I think that's really something that's, for me, it's like, that's something that it's been important to me through my entire career as a director. And I think it's really it's been like this kind of thing which I shouldn't be a female in my role as a director, I shouldn't be a female in my role as a film worker, I should be someone who doesn't have a family or doesn't have a parental responsibility. And I think that's really wrong for most men and women, because we would love to take care of
I think one thing that is worth mentioning, only because I can, like, Antonia, Sofia, Mona, and I are so close, and we have kids that are not so far apart in age and stuff. I think it's interesting that we have I think taken the greatest leaps in our careers during the periods of time that we had a child. It is not an accident, which is to say that I think that all of us are more productive because we have a child. I think that it's interesting. It was hard for me to really comprehend before we had a kid, when people would say things like this, because it sounds like it's always sounded like a generality or a platitude. However, I think it is remarkable the fire that it gives to have a child that needs food on the table and a roof over their head, no matter what. And it is incredible, like, how malleable we are, and like we're nimble, and I think we've done a lot. Totally. I think we've had a lot more as a result of having had a child.
I think so
than we did,
because we don't. None of us direct commercials, or like, we don't have that. We've never like gotten to be part of that universe. We make our living making movies. So, which is really challenging with the kind of movies that we choose to make. So we actually have to make them in order to pay our rent. And we don't have the luxury of having a lot of help or anything like that. Like, we kind of rely on each other and smaller periods where we can, maybe afford to hire someone to help us out with childcare. But it's really mostly just trying to making it work. But it makes you incredibly focused, because your time is so valuable. So that's sort of like, for us, I was like, I need to start a public school. I was like, oh my God, from the moment I drop her off until I pick her up, I am writing. I don't even get up to eat. Like, I don't take a lunch break. I am fucking working.
I feel like that's like the thing that changes too, is like, I've like interviewed for jobs with like people that I don't know, like that, or like new directors, stuff like that. And I'm like, I have a kid, but like, I can start as early as like 7:45, and I'm gonna be out at 6. But like, but I won't look at my phone, because I know, like I think you manage your time so much more effectively because it's so restricted, and you put value on your time in a way that you don't before, because that's time away from my kids. So I'm not gonna be like sitting around, just like fucking around, and like, just like, because if not, I'll be home. So I think you just like rearrange your priorities. But I do think that it's tricky, because like, for me, that that I work for someone else. I think it's different when you're the director because you have more control of like the work environment that you build around you. It is kind of like yeah, I have a kid, and good luck hiring a toddler mom that's pregnant with another kid. Like, who wants to have that editor? You know, like it's hard, and especially with editors that like directors totally abuse their time. I mean, starting with Antonio.
I think
He abused his time so much that he decided to fucking marry you to make it okay.
it's an important point though to make about having boundaries, you know? Especially when you're not the director, of really having strong boundaries of like, you know, what you can offer and what you're willing to do. Because as we all know, directors don't understand what boundaries are, you know, or they wouldn't get their films made, you know. So it's good to come into I think that's good advice. It's like to be very clear on your boundaries, and, you know, if someone's not into it, then it's not the right project for you.
Can we just quickly discuss that Antonio and Sofia's child looks like Matt Damon? and Antonio, this guy's yours, right? Look at Matt Damon.
Hilarious joke. I really love that one.
We don't know what the new one's gonna look like.
Yeah.
The new one might look like Brady, and that would be very suspicious.
My favorite thing though, oh, your son's so handsome. You sure he's yours?
Hey, buddy, you're super handsome. I'm just saying that he's handsome in that Matt Damon sort of way.
He's the combination.
Thanks so much. Really nice talking with you today on this great day. A great day for our country. Good to have you all here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was fun. And so lovely to see Brady and Mona.
Yeah. See me, Mona.
Everybody, this was so lovely.
I'll share the podcast with you guys when it's up. It will be up tomorrow, so you can send it to your friends. No.
Oh,
All right. Lots of love. Have a
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.